I think that we in K-12 education get a little fixated on our mission being to ensure that every student graduates with a meaningful diploma. But really our mission is to make sure that that diploma is a ticket to something. And increasingly, especially in the region that we live in, that ticket to something has to involve some kind of STEM preparation. The reality is that nobody loves learning more than a 4 or 5-year-old. And the reality is that that's where we really can light that fire that can stay ignited throughout their academic career. So why Full Day K, which we implemented this year in Highline for every child, is so important is in a half-day program you can't get science. The reality, though, is that in a full-day kindergarten classroom you can get the arts, which are also very important when we're talking about this. You can get science. And, you know, 5-year-olds will stare at a plastic terrarium full of snails for an hour and give you every detail on what those snails are doing. And it's fascinating to them. They love learning. They're sponges. They don't know what they're not capable of, and the reality is they're capable of far more than we're allowing them to actually achieve by not investing in creating really rich learning environments in those pre-kindergarten, kindergarten, first, second, and third grade classrooms. Because I think that's where engineers and entrepreneurs are born, is in the kindergarten classroom, because learning is fun, and that's where the creative spirit, I think, is ignited.
We're admitting college students now who will go into professions that are unheard of. I mean, once they graduate in 4 or 5 years, they'll go into entirely new and different occupations. And we need to prepare the pipeline, if you will, for them to be competitive in that type of environment.
Yeah. Maybe just to build on that, I think the particulars change, and it's quite volatile. The foundations are the same. Newtonian mechanics hasn't changed. Symbolic logic hasn't really changed. Writing a good term paper, that really hasn't changed. There are foundations that are really critical, and what we expect of our employees is to learn the particulars on the job.
When we asked the students what was the most meaningful, helpful preparation that you received here at Aviation, the students all hands down said their internship, because the majority of students at Aviation have a very meaningful work-based internship. And I'm not talking just a couple of weeks where you go in and shadow and mentor. I'm talking kids signing non-disclosure agreements because they're working on things that are so top secret and real life that they can't tell anyone at home even what they're working on. So I think what we see at Aviation is a model for not just how you could replicate the school in terms of its partnering, but also what are those components that are really meaningful for kids. So we're taking that internship component in Highline and expanding it to be for every single student in high school in the coming years.
One of the things that I've been involved with is starting and building NConnect, and what we do is we pair up mentors from industry with teachers and students to provide that mentoring throughout the school year, and then also in the summer we provide internships. And I remember not that long ago, maybe 5 years ago, there were no internships for high school students. It just was unheard of. And now it's becoming more typical, and I'd like to see that expand dramatically, because we find the same thing. We find that when the students have that real experience, those real connections, that's where they get the biggest impact that we see. And for the teachers too, not just the students. The teachers, when we first started working with the teachers, they were shocked to see that we wanted to go out and help them. And they had never been asked to come into a semiconductor fab before. So I think it's both teachers and students where we see the greatest impact. When those engineers go out and work in the schools, they remember what it's like to learn Newtonian mechanics for the first time, and how magical it is to take this simple law and apply it to a wide range of different applications. And for them to go teach that, then it forces them to really understand and to make it provide some context around whatever they're teaching, and in doing so they remember what it's like to learn. And so what we find is that actually the mentoring, we don't pay for any mentors. It's all on free time and when they can fit it in, but it has a huge benefit to them individually and for their leadership too, actually.
They've got to go see what it means to be a professional. How do you interact with people in an appropriate adult professional way? Many of our children do not have those role models elsewhere in their lives, and until they see that, how can we say that they're prepared for it?
We want those students to do real meaningful work, and it's important for them. If they're doing meaningful work, their experience will be different. So whether it be computer science sort of skills, just basically knowing how to develop spreadsheets, to do other work, and having some basic skills actually makes that a lot easier. I'm actually quite bullish that I think we can transform internships for high school students. It was unheard of before, right? It just didn't happen. And I think if you have those two things, I think we can significantly expand.
Washington State University has been so focused on getting some great STEM programs going. How do you sort of look at this holistically and say it's really about the spirit of inquiry that leads to innovation?
Yeah. I think, Hanson, that's exactly the right question that we need to focus on. What we're discussing today is an important topic because it, frankly, is a continuum. And there's a lot of activity that's going on all over our state and throughout the country in this regard. And we're going to continue to be very aggressive. I think it is important, though, to note that one size doesn't necessarily fit all. Mm-hmm. And we are engaged in a lot of creative thought and innovation around this topic.
That rigorous foundation that is the equity question, and that we're not seeing it in the inner cities and in other districts that have other disadvantages. And I think that's the issue that energizes me. That's why I'm here today. That's why I'm taking my day off work to spend time doing this, is because I think that is the core issue for us today. And it's just unfair that a student who's not prepared in this world that's more competitive isn't going to do very well in the future, and we need to address that.
The reality is that we are asking more than ever before of our educators, too. And there are only so many hours of the day. So I think we've got to get really smart about how we give them opportunities to learn and, if you will, catch up with where our kids already are. And I think to the point that, others have made that, we don't exactly know the future that we're really preparing ourselves for. And what we prepare for, what we think is going to happen 2 to 3, 5 years from now could be very, very different than what we believe it to be. So I think this is really uncharted territory for most K-12 systems. I think some are doing it better than others. The reality is that in systems like ours, that we don't even have reliable, wireless capacity in some of our schools, which makes testing and other things a problem. We spend a lot of time, and we've done it here today, talking about how we prepare our students to join STEM fields. We also need to spend time talking about how we are preparing the educators to inspire those students to become the next generation of educators to teach those who will go into these STEM-related fields. And that portion of the conversation, I think, gets lost way too often. And so we've got to start talking, too, about how do we make teaching a more desirable profession for our folks, and how we create alternative paths for folks to become teachers so that we can get more people. I mean, how much would you love Scott to be your 10th grade teacher, right? I mean, this would be exciting. Somebody who's really excited, who cares deeply, who clearly is excellent at what he does. But right now, the routes for Scott to get there are so prohibitive that the chances of someone like him going in and doing that just are not good. And we've got to turn that around.
Thank you for being so open and frank with us, and thank you for your attention and your participation as well.